Hello YouTube! Recently, Jeff Nippard released a new line of programs called the Essentials, in which he pretty much promises you that you will be able to maximize your gains in 45 minutes tops. And he calls that method of training minimalism, which of course immediately caught my eye because, as you might know, I am anti-minimalist when it comes to training. So I knew I had to actually take a look at these programs and share with you guys whether or not they are good. Of course, I had to wait until their actual release because I wasn't going to base the video out of nothing. Even though Jeff did release a video explaining and introducing the concept, I didn't have the proper scheme in front of my eyes, so I had to wait. But now that they are available and I got my hands on the 5 of them, the 4 of them actually, I have all of the material necessary to critique the programs. So this is what we're going to be doing today. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to discuss minimalist and maximalist approaches to training and their effectiveness when it comes to muscle gains. Then we're going to analyze Jeff's marketing strategies in relation to said minimalism, and we're going to assess whether or not they are malicious or if he's actually being honest with you guys. And then at number 3, we're going to take a look at the programs as a conclusion to decide if they are good and if they are actually worth your money, because they are quite pricey. So, since Jeff defines his programs as minimalist, it would be very interesting to know what he thinks minimalism is. He doesn't immediately introduce the concept, he starts with maximalism. And for Jeff, maximalism is spending as much time as needed to maximize progress. And that is a definition I can get behind. I think that it is actually quite correct. But after that, Jeff compares what a minimalist would do to what a maximalist would do, and he says that a minimalist would train for 1 hour and get 98% of the gains, and a maximalist would train for 2 hours and get 100% of the results, and told you that this is the right way to do it. This, of course, is a really poor comparison because the numbers are not right. I hope that you understand that from 1 to 2 hours, you're not just going to get 2%. Most of the literature shows 20-30% increases in gains after the first hour for certain individuals. I'm certain that Jeff was just being hyperbolic, but it's important to point it out because this already shows that there is going to be a certain bias towards minimalism that is not corroborated by numbers, which is, of course, completely logical. He's trying to sell you a minimalist program, so he has to make minimalism look as good as possible. But if we look at logic, we understand that the 2-hour workout in this scenario will always be better, and it's going to be much better than just 2%. In this case, therefore, a maximalist would of course favor the 2-hour workout because getting a second hour out of the training, so 1 hour removed from the training, is of course going to lead to less gains. My issue with this example is also the fact that if an actual minimalist looked at these numbers, he would quickly come to the realization that if you only gain 2% by training an extra hour after the first hour, why not just do an hour every single day? That way you get double the gains. This is just a flaw in logic, but again, it's not something that disproves Jeff's claim. It's just something that's a little bit silly. Now, this is something I must establish right now because when you discuss training with minimalists, they have a tendency to use such claims which are not, again, logical. And so I must establish that for this video, we're going to consider that training more always produces more results as long as fatigue is taken into account. So of course, it's absolutely possible to overdo it to a point that now you are not just getting less in return, less gains, you're actually hurting the gains that you accumulated beforehand. But to be able to do that, you must be a real cretin. So we're not going to even take that into account. That being said, there is still some truth to that because it is true that minimalism tends to leave gains on the table because you take the essentials. That's the reason why his programs are called the essentials. But the reason why this is still a worthy approach, quote unquote, is because that first hour that you do in training is still going to represent a large chunk on the gains you are going to make. This is where minimalists are absolutely correct. It is true that you can get 80% of the results from roughly 60 to 70% of the program. Meaning that for you and for me, we could take our programs, slash a good portion of it, and still get similar results. Will we get the same amount of results? No. And this is where I disagree with minimalists, who would not only tell you that you would get the same gains, but that you would even get better gains. That is the minimalist mantra. Do less and get more results. That makes absolutely no sense. But I was very happy in the video to see that this is not something that Jeff was trying to push. It's just that his word selection and his number selection at the start was a little bit flimsy. The reason why this is important to know is because it's leading directly to a very important concept in training that I call the pyramid of priority. Meaning that when you make a program, the number one priority is to put lifts and movements that you think are the most important at the top, because these will be the ones that get you the most gains. What you open the workout with gives you the most gains. So it's only logical, of course, that if you cut the bottom of the pyramid, the bottom of the day, these are lifts that don't get you much gains compared to the one at the top. And so therefore, you, of course, are going to see a very small decrease in results, only roughly 20%. But you and I both know that 20% is still 20%. These are very important movements, but are also very costly in terms of time. So based on these numbers, we could also assess that you could cut your training time in two, and that would not cut the amount of gains you make in two. You would maybe again lose 10-20% in terms of gains, but you would spend half the time in the gym. And this is the basis of Jeff's program. It's the idea in his mind. He's telling you that what you're going to do is not going to be maximalized. So you're going to leave some gains on the table, but you're going to do everything in your power to get as much muscle gains as possible in as little time as possible. This is the premise. This is what I actually look at the program through, because it's thinking of training as something that utilizes resource. And it's looking at the resource that most people tend to not have enough of to be able to train, which is time. Jeff cites a study that shows that most people say that the thing that prevents them from training is actually time. It's the biggest blocker. I'm not going to question the legitimacy of that study, because I actually believe this to be true. We don't have infinite time, and therefore strategizing the time that you have in your life is very important, and the time you're going to be putting in the gym needs to be put to good use. So in this sense, minimalism is absolutely interesting, and it's a thing that needs to be regarded as such. Now, for what type of people? That is the question to ask. Who do you think Jeff was trying to target with this video? Who do you think is going to resonate with it the most? And who do you think is going to get the best gains from said practice? Across the board, it's going to be clear. It's noobs. It's people new in the gym. These are the people who benefit from minimalism the most because they need the least amount of work to grow. You understand that if someone like me went minimalist, I would shoot myself in the foot. There is a reason why I train as much as I train. It's not because I enjoy spending 3 hours in the gym. When it's winter and it's 0 degrees where I train and the bar is freezing, trust me, I want to go home just as much as the next guy. But I understand that volume is important. So this is mostly going to be relevant for people who are beginner. And this is an important thing to point out, because this is 95% of the people on YouTube Fitness. So when you make a program, if you want to help the biggest amount of people, what practices will you employ? Strategies that help noobs. What do noobs need? The bare minimum. So you make a program that is minimalistic in nature, and that is exactly what Jeff did. Because most everyone will absolutely be able to progress with shorter workouts given that they are beginners. So it's a practice that is better suited for the general population. The general population that will never make it out of intermediate. So they will basically be minimalists for the rest of their life. And even as an intermediate, you can make gains on a minimalist program. Even as an advanced lifter, it's possible. You can always make it work. It's just that it's a limiting training method. It's the reason why I personally don't like it. But we're going to get back to that, because for now, advanced lifters, intermediates, these are not relevant to the discussion. We are only going to take into account the noobs, because this is the target demographic that Jeff is actually trying to capture. The people that I personally call normies. Normies, people who don't have any training experience, who know nothing about the gym, who might necessarily like working out. These are not the people that I talk to. If you watch my videos, I suspect that you are an iron addict just as much as I am. I have a few beginners here, but I know for a fact that if you are a normie, you're not going to last on this channel. This channel is normie proof. But this is not the case for Jeff. So he made his new program. He thought to himself, okay, who is the biggest target audience that is going to maximize my revenue and also that is going to help me to actually reach the most people? It's normies, it's noobs, it's the average Joe that doesn't know anything about the gym. What do these people fear? Well, they fear being ridiculed, but they also fear having to spend hours and hours in the gym. So what do? I come up with a program I'm going to call Minimalist so as to actually be attractive to these types, and then I'm going to schedule everything to make sure that they will be done in an hour. If you tell the average person that they can be jacked by spending 2 hours in the gym a week, which is one of the programs that Jeff promotes, he of course is going to jump on it. People want the maximal amount of results for the minimum amount of time. And this is something that we're going to observe afterwards. We're going to decide whether or not the programs actually manage to do that. But as a premise, it is sound and it's something that Jeff promotes. I just want to point out one thing, and it's something that I just mentioned. There is something to be said about fitness that tries to tailor to the average person. Because usually when that happens, fitness is degraded. When you start targeting the lowest denominator, you're going to have to lower your standards because the average person cannot hang. They cannot train hard because they don't have what it takes. So you have to dumb it down for them. And I personally despise it, right? I understand that as a business practice, it's great. But to me, if you want a good body, but you don't want to put in the work or you find excuses like I don't have time, I spit in your face, right? Because you don't deserve it. You don't want it hard enough. Jeff is much nicer than I am, and you will see that actually I believe that his approach might be the correct one. Because most of the time, the people who say they don't have time have plenty of time. They have plenty of time to watch Netflix for hours and hours or spend time on their phone. What they don't have is the ability to actually put in the work and get in the gym. And I'm certain that Jeff actually knows that. He's not going to say it because he doesn't want to offend these people or lose their business. What he will say instead is, okay, I understand you don't have time. All right, I'm going to make a program that is totally going to be helping you get in the gym because of course you're so busy, you work 100 hours a week, so I'll give you 2 hours a week for you to train and that's going to be that, okay? That is great. That is the mindset and that is the mentality that will actually get these people in the gym. Will they get optimal gains? Of course not, but this is the one approach that actually works with them and therefore this is what makes it optimal. Understand that optimal training doesn't exist. It's a case-by-case basis. I can make a 3-hour workout and it's optimal on paper. You will hate it. You'll spend an hour and then leave. Then the program is not optimal. An hour program would be better for you if it was suited to your needs. So again, great strategizing by Jeff. He understands his target audience perfectly. He understands that the only type of training that they will follow is the type of quote-unquote short and sweet training that he created. And therefore he presents his program as minimalist. And it's not just to attract these people, it's that it also makes these people feel better. Because if he called his program the program for lazy fucks, how many people do you think would buy it? Instead, he promotes it as minimalism. Minimalism sounds smart, it sounds sophisticated, and it's also very trendy nowadays to be a minimalist, and therefore people feel better about themselves. Then you also look at the way he presents it, by the comparison of 98%, 100%, he's pretty much putting it as not only do you train less, but you'll get just as much result, so you cannot possibly be lazy because you are going to be just as good as the people who put in more hours. Is it true? Absolutely not, as I already proved. But again, it's a marketing strategy. It is extremely smart. It makes people who don't want to work for as long feel better about their choice. Now, the question we could ask ourselves is this malicious? Is this malevolent? Is Jeff actually lying to his audience? And I think that the answer here is no. I think that what Jeff is doing is he's doing something called normie baiting. He's making these people come in by telling them, hey, I have this easy program for you. It's only 45 minutes. These types come in, and once they're in, he actually sets them up with a good plan. A plan that is going to be anything but easy, but that they will think is easy because they don't have to spend as much time in the gym. And it's something he explains with his brother, who he says his brother hates the gym, so he sets him up with a very minimalistic program so as to get him in the gym. And that is the trap. That is Jeff's aim. You lure people in with easy training and then they develop a love for training, which means that at some point they're going to be able to graduate from said easy training, which was never really easy in the first place. So that's smart. The thing with beginners, and it's something I've said times and times again, is that The worst thing you can do to them is to lock them in a gym 3 to 5 times a week for hours at a time, because they're going to burn out. They just got started. And the issue is that, and Jeff knows this is what bodybuilders used to do. When I got started, all of the programs were long as fuck with tons of sets and reps, and you just couldn't get it through. And even if you could, it was boring, and the amount of returns and gains you would get from all of that time invested was minimal. So it was really a waste of time. It burned people out, and it disgusted people from the gym, because you don't have the mental stamina for it when you get started. And on top of that, even if you did have the mental stamina, you don't have the work capacity necessary to put in that much work. So what you end up doing is junk volume. You go through the motion. How many of you guys have endured that? You have a long-ass program and you think, okay, I have to survive this. So what do? You send back, you take it easy, because your objective is get to the end of the program. But the issue is that you're not putting in your best effort for every set, you don't go to failure, you use baby weights, and therefore you never actually progress. You would have done better on a minimalist approach that shrinks the training but puts much more intensity and focus on every single set. That is also something we will see in the program when we look at them. Then there's also the fact that 3 hours in the gym when you got started is useless, because if you spend 3 hours in the gym, it's supposed to be 3 hours of hard sets, meaning that you have crazy muscular entrance. When you get started, you don't have that. A few sets is going to be enough to tire the muscle to the point that there will be growth. So it's also a waste of time. This is where Jeff's comparison between maximalism and minimalism makes a ton of sense. Why would you train more than an hour when an hour gets you 95% of your gains? When you are a novice, it's going to be a truth. The more you progress, the more that percentage goes down, the more hours you have to put in to get close to 100%. This is the logic behind it. Now, as I said, and as I wrote here very, very rightly, this stops being true the more you progress. So you start with 45 minutes an hour, and then you lengthen that as much as possible. This is one thing I'm pointing out right now. Jeff presents his program as being suitable for novices, intermediates, advanced. I don't think that's true, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, because most people who will jump on a program called the Essentials is going to be novices. So it's not like someone who's super advanced who trains for hours is going to think, oh, I will make better gains on this. No one is that stupid. That being said, you will see that the programs are very easy to modify to actually go from a minimalist to a maximalist approach. So this is also something we're going to discuss afterwards. And there is a number that I think is very important and interesting here, and that is the fact that apparently, based on the literature, one set a week for a muscle group gets you 64% of the gains, if you are a noob. That is an insane number, but I actually do believe that. The issue is that, of course, 64% is roughly half of the gains you could make. So most people would want to know how to get to 100%. And the answer is, you can't. It's almost impossible to pinpoint the amount of sets and reps that is going to get you to 100%, which is why maximalism has its place. Most people do more sets, not because they like doing more sets, but it's because they want to get to as close as possible to 100% as they can. So what they do is they push their baseline, they push their fatigue. They never know if they reach 100%, but they want to be as close to it as possible, and they know that the best way to do that is just to do more work. That is the logic behind it. So, of course, the more you progress, the more that 64% number is going to go down. You're not going to stay at 64%. The more advanced you become, the lower it becomes. So most likely it might even reach something like 30%. And now we have to make up for 70%. And this is why added volume, of course, makes a ton of sense. And why for novices, it might not. If 64% is what you gain from one set, if you do 4 sets, you understand that you might very well be close to 100%. This is also the logic behind it. And I agree with that 100%. Where I don't agree with, however, is when Jeff includes pictures and footage of Dorian Yates to solve that principle. When you try to solve a program, don't include PD users as the reason why your program works. I mean, it's at this point, I think this is actually disingenuous. Just because your program so happens to follow principles that Dorian says he followed is not a reason to say that your program is good. Dorian Yates was a PD user, and I don't give a fuck what he says. He used much more than just a few doses here and there. He was on a ton of shit like they all were back then. His training program was not the reason why he was that big. There is nothing magical about HIT. I and other naturals have debunked HIT a long time ago, There's nothing magical about doing one set to beyond failure. That means absolutely nothing. It's hocus pocus. People believe that because the people who promote that tend to be very charismatic and they tend to be jacked. Mike Menzer is the best example. I listened to tens of hours of his seminars. The guy was brilliant, but he was also stupid in some aspects, saying things like easy bar curls don't work your bicep. I still don't understand why people take everything he said at face value, or in fact I do. It's because, again, he was charismatic and sounded smart, and that is all most people need to just follow someone blindly. Same with Jeff. Jeff is smart, he's big, doesn't mean that he knows everything. So when he includes Yates, you should actually raise an eyebrow because this is really weird. PED users are out of the discussion entirely. And I also want to point out that it's funny to include Yates in a video that you try to sell to people who don't have the time to train because they want to have social lives, for example, when you consider that Yates' nickname was the Shadow. He was a monk. He was known to isolate himself for months at a time, years at a time, and then return with a monstrous shape. He is the constant and complete opposite of the people that are supposed to jump on this program. So using him as an example of why HIT works, I think, is also completely idiotic. That being said, another name was dropped, namely Jeff Halbert. And this is when we start talking about things that are actually interesting, because Jeff Halbert is a very advanced natural bodybuilder who also only does 4 hard sets per week of work. That is very, very small. It's a very small amount of sets. Most people will do from 12 to 20. 10 can be absolutely workable for intermediates, but for someone so advanced doing only 4 sets, that is absolutely insane. This is actual real minimalism. And then there's also the fact that Jeff Halbert has a very small exercise selection. He does the same training times and times again. I personally don't understand how bodybuilders train like this. I know a ton of guys who do that. I would shoot myself in the face if I did the 4 same exercises day in and day out. But some people like Albert actually make it work. That being said, I want to point out that Jeff is, of course, a natural bodybuilder, and he is mostly in the business of revealing gains by getting lean. That's sort of his thing, which also means that he might not be very interested in maximizing muscle gains. What he might want is to just maintain what he have and then diet down to extreme levels to reveal all of the muscular building that he's done throughout the years. The interesting question is, did he build that muscularity off of HIT and only 4 sets? The answer might very well be no. And then the question is also, would he make better gains with more sets? That's also something that cannot be denied. Maybe he can get gains at 4 sets, but what about 6? What about 8? This is, of course, a case-by-case basis, and I do not know, but I just want to point that out, because Jeff uses the argument of HIT to explain why his program works. The issue is that HIT, again, logically speaking, is bogus, and therefore, I don't think it's a good argument for his program. His program doesn't need the HIT argument to work. The fact that most novices will get a lot of muscular development done from minimal sets is enough. And this leads me to another problem, and that is the fact that Jeff never really explains what he means by minimalism. And when you're going to base your program off of a name, you sort of need to give people a definition. Because from what I understand, and he never actually points it out right, for Jeff, minimalism is doing less sets and still being jacked, which is not really a definition. It's just a category, or it's just a condition, meaning that anyone who does less sets and is jacked is therefore a minimalist. For me, the exercise selection is what makes or breaks minimalism. Minimalists tend to be people who do a very small amount of exercises times and times again. They might vary the sets and the reps, but the fact that they stick with these exercises is what matters. Usually, minimalists also tend to not train their entire body. They leave out certain muscle groups, because minimalism, first and foremost, is a strength practice. Powerlifting programming is deeply minimalistic for a reason. It's because it works for their sport. Jeff also points it out when he discusses strength versus size. He rightly points out that maintaining strength and building strength takes much less sets than building muscles or maintaining muscles. Hypertrophy is a game of volume for the most part. So minimalism is, of course, going to be applied entirely differently in that aspect as well. And the question I have for Jeff, and for anyone who still calls themselves minimalist, is if you met someone who did less sets, for example, but who wasn't jacked or who regressed off of it, would you still call that person a minimalist? Or would they not be considered one because with them that approach doesn't work? That's also interesting to regard. Minimalism lacks flexibility. And you see that especially with what I call the HIT police. It's people who still absolutely to this day want to defend Menzo's methods of one set, which, by the way, that's HIT. Right? If you want to hear more about it, it's in the description. I made a long video about it. HIT is one set to failure every like 6 to 8 days. It's not 4 sets a week. Even that is not technically HIT. It's way too high volume. Menzo will tell you you're doing way too much volume and you're going to lose your gains. Is that true? Absolutely not. But the problem with the HIT police is that they are mostly interested in being right and not in actually making gains. So this is the reason why they usually never post pictures. And every time I have someone tell me that this big bodybuilder is a minimalist, like Jeff Albert, I look at their program and it's not actually HIT or real minimalism. It's just effective. It's something that is going to be very concentrated. And you will see that with Jeff, it's absolutely the same thing. And that is because minimalism in truth doesn't really exist. And that is because it is based off of antagonism. To be minimalistic or to be a minimalist, you have to not be. This is what defines minimalism. Even in real life, when are you a minimalist? When you don't own things. So it's an absence of action. It's an absence of being that defines you as a minimalist. It's the same for training. Who is a minimalist? Someone who doesn't do extra sets. So you don't do them, so you're something. You will come to understand, and this is not related to the video, that terms that define themselves by the absence of something and can only exist as antagonistic forces to other terms, it tends to be things that are void or vapid by themselves because they can only exist as a reaction to something else. I'm not going to get into the philosophy of minimalism, but this is pretty much the gist of it. And this is why, again, if you discuss HIT with the HIT police, they will often try to botter en touche, as we say in French. They're going to try and cop out of the discussion by telling you that if you tried HIT and you didn't get gains, it's because you did it wrong, which is extremely convenient, but also shows that they are deeply intellectually dishonest. Every time they can, they modify the definition of HIT to fit their own agenda. So every time you come up with an answer or example to prove that their method doesn't work, they can say, well, it's not real HIT. This, of course, again, is the sign of someone who is not willing to engage. And therefore, their entire philosophy and training methodology is based off of buzzwords and semantics. Pay very close attention to the terms that people use. Most of the training jargon we use nowadays has turned into buzzwords. Another example, junk volume. Junk volume, which is also something that minimalists like to use to sell their methods. They'll tell you, hey, this is the right amount of sets, and if you do more, you're going to do junk volume. But the thing with junk volume is that, in the same fashion, minimalists tend to use that term to reinforce their own practice. So, for example, one could say that what defines a minimalist is that they don't do junk volume, so they don't do these additional sets. But that also, therefore, begs the question, how many sets are too much sets? Again, for Menzer, it was 1. After 1, it was junk volume. For Jeff, in this example, it's going to be 3. After your first top 2 sets, you're going to do junk volume. You see that this is completely arbitrary, and anyone is going to be able to give you a different definition of what junk volume actually constitutes. I think that junk volume is defined as follows. Junk volume is the point in your program or training day where any additional set that you add to the program is going to take away from its effectiveness. To me, that is junk volume. If we want to discuss it on the basis of additional sets that are not as important as the previous sets, we need to call them less effective sets or less effective volume. But I think calling it junk volume is extremely disingenuous. Because if we apply this very definition, by default, it means that every single set after the top set, meaning your first hard set, is junk volume, because this is the set with the most potential for growth. Afterwards, they are of course going to be less important. Do we stop doing back-off sets? Do we only stop at 1 set? In that case, Mike Menzer was correct. Then we can discuss weekly frequency. If you just did your 1 set, how long do you have to wait until you do your 1 set again? Menzer said days, sometimes a week. What does Jeff say? You come to understand that again, this is just a term and it has no real basis in reality. This is a case-by-case thing as well. So as a summary for junk volume, some people will consider that it's extra sets that yield less results than the first, which for reasons I already explained is nonsensical, because this means that all follow-up sets after the first sets are junk volume. For me, the answer is that junk volume is a scale. The more you do in a session, the less you get back based on your current muscular endurance. And this is the last part I want you to retain. Junk volume for thee is not junk volume for me. One man's junk volume is another man's junk treasure or volume treasure. I might need more sets to be able to get the maximum hypertrophy response. You might need less. If you train as much as I did, you would do junk volume. If I train as much as you did, I would undertrain. This is the reality of the situation and something very important to understand. So, based on the premise of the program, yes, doing more than 2 working sets might be considered junk volume because for a novice, it's simply not needed. But for anyone past that level, it might actually be an error to toss that volume away. And if you refuse to think like this and you apply an absolutist mindset to junk volume, you are going to fall for the type of minimalist bias that is present in a statement like, if you do more than 5 minutes of ab work a day, you're doing junk volume. This is a direct quote from a man called Martin Bekan, who is also a natural bodybuilder, great shape, but who says idiotic things such as this because he is dogmatic he is very dogmatic when it comes to minimalism. You understand that this makes absolutely no sense. Someone who just got started training their abs might only need 5 minutes to get effective sets in. Someone like me who has been training abs for 10 years needs more than 5 minutes because if I get less than 5 minutes of effective set, I'm just going to get less volume and I'm not going to get any hypertrophic response. So be careful with this type of absolutist crap. Understand that most things are on a scale and most things are nuanced. And now that I've said all of this, and I explained in length why the minimalist approach might not be best suited for everyone, you could tell yourself, okay, this must mean that the programs are going to be garbage because Jeff said that the programs are minimalist. Well, not really, because you see, I actually don't believe that these programs are minimalist programs at all. Rather, they are efficient programs. Again, I'm not in Jeff's head. I don't understand, or at least, yes, I do perfectly understand why he called and branded these programs minimalist. It's to actually get people's attention because they think they're going to have to do less work. In truth, they are not minimalist programs at all. They are just very condensed. And I'm very happy to say that these are actually great programs. They are great programs because they understand application of lifting rotations, of diversity of exercise selection, and of proper intensity management along with volume management. You know me, I'm a hard ass when it comes to programs. I judge programs extremely critically. But I was extremely surprised and I was very happily surprised when I read these programs. Because when I saw the video that Jeff made, I thought that this was a knee-jerk reaction from the minimalist community who dislikes the push of more maximalized programs on this platform and wanted to get back to stuff like squat, bench, and deadlift. I was very afraid this was going to be a program like this, with almost no accessory work, no isolation work. And it was the exact opposite. So let's now get us into the review session of this video. For legal reasons, I'm not going to be able to actually unveil all of the programs for you because they're brand new and they're actually behind a paywall. So I'm going to stay as vague as possible, but you'll see that this won't have to be very long. There are 4 programs you can get, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. I've reviewed every single one in detail and I can tell you that they are all great. I would even go as far as to say that these are the best programs from Jeff Nippard to date. This is really good stuff. The exercise selection is excellent. The way the priority is scheduled is excellent. Even though, yes, you're going to do less working sets, I have found that the set selection is great. Now, for example, I have the 2 weeks, the 2 times a week program. So you do a full body A and you do a full body B. And you're going to do something like start with an heavy press for 1 working set. Then you do a back off of that heavy press. So you're going to do 1 more set. So that's 2 working sets. Then you do something like a hip hinge for 2 working sets. Then some isolation for the upper back for 2 working sets. Some work for the leg for 1 set, some work for the long head of the tricep for 1 set, some lateral raise or elevation for 1 set. It's complete. You get an entire body work, and for a novice, it's all you need. Now, I have certain things, of course, to discuss and some criticism to actually raise. For example, the very logical discussion of if you manage to warm up and get to your 1 working set, why not do 1 more? How long does it actually take you to do 1 more set? The answer is not that long. The warm-up part is long, and Jeff also knows that. Slapping on another working set to your heavy press is going to take you an extra 3 to 4 minutes. So it's really not that much, and this is why I tell you to not be dogmatic or absolutist when you approach that type of program. Yes, it's sold to you as minimalist. Yes, it's only 45 minutes to an hour. If you wake up one day and you realize that, hey, I actually have more time than I thought to train, you can just modify this program and do more sets, and it's absolutely going to work. Then there are certain practices, like drop sets, for example, that are supposed to boost the volume without boosting the workload, which I find ironical because drop sets are notorious for creating junk volume. This is also when we get into the discussion of what junk volume actually constitutes. As we said, it's mostly sets that are not as efficient as you would think for hypertrophy. We define that set and the level of scaling that we have to discuss differently based on who you are, but I personally believe that if you did a set at, I don't know, like 300 pounds for bench, and then you do a drop set with 60% of that, you understand that even if you go to failure quickly, you only get to failure quickly with that weight because you're pre-fatigued from the heavy set. This does not make the volume that you made relevant. It's still junk volume because you're in a pre-fatigued state. So I find it strange to add drop sets to a program that is supposed to save time by minimizing junk volume, because the only thing you do is you add more volume. I'm not calling it junk volume here. It's still volume, but based on Jeff's definition, it's definitely junk volume, because understand that between a drop set and an additional hard set with the same weight 3 minutes after the top set, the one that gives you the most quality volume is the top set. It's not the drop set. So this was also something that I wanted to point out. I was pleasantly surprised, as I said, by the quality of the exercise selection. There's a lot of variety, and on top of that, there are substitutions options. And I think it's the first time I see someone else, besides me, doing that in a program. And he actually gives you two. So if you have a lift that you cannot do for a reason or another, Jeff gives you two additional options that you can switch to, which also could serve as rotations. This is why I say that I don't think that these are minimalist programs at all. Jeff actually created something that is much greater than minimalism. He created a complete program that just so happens to be condensed. If you wanted, you could buy the 2 times a week program, start with what Jeff prescribes, and then just expand from it. Add rotations, add variations, add a fourth day. You can. He gave you the exercises. Then you can add sets, you can add reps. This is why I actually think, and I'll get back to that, that these are actually good investments, because you can stay on one of these programs for years and years if you know how to modify them. Now, in terms of other things that I wanted to discuss for this video, the issue with low sets, yes. So you understand, I hope, that there's not only upsides of working up to a top set and then doing one set of that. The issue is that now you concentrate all of your intensity for that one set, which also means that you're going to go to failure. This increases the risk of injury. The beauty of being able to do more than one top set is that you don't have to put all of your eggs in one basket. It's not one set or die. You can do 3 or 4. So you can slightly reduce the intensity and you can do reps in reserve because you know you get more reps afterwards. So it's something to keep an eye on because it would be stupid to get injured. Now, I have my eyes on the 3 times a week program. This one is a full body, an upper, and a lower with 1 to 2 days of rest in between. And I look at the lifts, and based on the lifts, it is correct that most people would be able to do that in an hour. Although I must point out that there would have been a much better option when it comes to actually crunching time and being able to be faster. And that is, of course, the use of supersets. Jeff is aware of supersets and discusses that in the book and in the video. But as I look at the program right there, I don't see any supersets. Unless I am blind, which I technically am without the glasses, I don't see any in the program per se. He gives you the option of supersets, and I don't understand why he did that. Like, if I look at the 2 times a week, for example, I'm going to cite some random lifts that don't really give away the program, but I see lunges and I see skull crushers. Why not superset that? These are not the same muscles. You're not always forced or obliged to do antagonistic muscle or supersets just because the muscles are not like a good pair, like some people like presses then rows. I love that as well. But just because the muscles have nothing to do with one another doesn't mean that you can superset them. If anything, it's even greater. You do lateral raises and calf raises, hey, superset that shit. Don't wait 2 minutes in between sets. That's actually a waste of time. Jeff points it out very rightly where he says that 70 to 80% of all of the time you spend in the gym, you spend resting. You don't spend training. isn't that the time that needs to be tackled? Isn't that what needs to be tackled instead of hard sets? Why would you remove hard sets from a training program instead of actually targeting the amount of time you spend doing nothing? This is also my issue with minimalism, is that when they try to take away things, they always take away the things that actually are important. It's like when you hire someone for a company and they're supposed to slash away the extra cost, they always slash away the stuff that's useful and they don't slash away the things that are actually impairing the process and the business. Same logic here. If you are dead set on removing things from the program, remove the resting time in between exercises and just superset them instead. That was my rant. I'm personally very happy that people like Jeff are starting to realize the importance of superset, the importance of time, and the importance of being as optimal as possible with your time management in the gym. Now, when it comes to priorities, I discussed it. If you want to be a minimalist, you have to have your pyramid of priority down to pat, because your first sets need to be the most important ones. So let's see if Jeff actually does that. Let's look at the 3 times a week program. What does he open you with? A heavy squat, a heavy hack squat back off, and then some heavy pressing. What is at the end of the day? Some crunches, some shoulder work, some curls. He gets it. This is a proper pyramid of intensity. You keep the light stuff for the end and you open the rest with the heavy. Let's see if this was a fluke. Let's go to the 4 times a week. What do I see in front of my eyes? A lower body day, okay? Starts with heavy squat, then a back off, then some hamstring curls, and then some calf stuff, and then some ab stuff. He gets it. The entire program is like this. You know me, I rarely tell you programs are good, but this one is really good. Like, I understand now why it took so long to release. He put in the work. This is top level stuff. On top of that, I love seeing a proper lower body. Heavy squat, some hamstring isolation, some calf isolation, some ab, go home. Your upper body days need to be long lifts and your lower body days need to be short. Why? You expend so much more energy on lower body with lower body lifts. And you also work so many more muscles at the same time with one lift. For the upper body, you have to have much more isolation. So this is the proper way to approach it, and that's exactly what he does. The 4 times a week is exactly like that. You have big-ass upper body days, because you're going to do pull-ups, chest press, some cable curl, some tricep stuff, some shoulder stuff, some upper body stuff, some shoulder press, and then the lower days are much smaller. This is proper programming, and I am really happy to see that. So this was it for hard sets, drop sets, supersets, the low sets to failure, the rotations, variations. I already explained the fact that you will not find a day where you don't want to do at least one thing. You can always rotate the movements. You can buy one program and just modify the movements following Jeff's suggestions. It's all great stuff. And there was also the differences between the splits, so I sort of covered that. Again, I can't go into more details than that because I would just be giving away the programs for free and I don't want to do that. But I can tell you that, again, the variation between the programs is good. I was a little bit afraid when I saw that he put out 4 because I thought it was a grifter move and they were all going to be the same. And I thought to myself, he should have included all of the programs in one, but now I understand why he separated them. These are completely different programs. One is a full body, one is going to be an upper-lower full body, another one is going to be a pure upper-lower, and then the 5 times a week is actually an upper-lower push-pull legs. So they're all different. You're not being scammed, and most of the time you can just buy one because it's very easy to go from a 2 times a week to a 4 times a week with the information that Jeff gives you. So that's also excellent. And as I said, the exercise selection is great as well. All top-notch lift, no lift that I would take away and replace by something better. I think that he went with the best stuff every single time. And so that leads us to the conclusion of this video. To answer the first question, the minimalist and maximalist discussion, which one is better? There is no answer. The one that is better is the one that works for you. You must do as many sets as possible to get as many reps, as much results as possible, which is of course going to be impacted by your time. How much time can you actually put in the gym? That also is important. We are humans after all. 2, is Jeff's marketing strategy dishonest, malicious, or actually something beneficial? I think it's beneficial. He is trying to normie bait people into training properly. You will start one of these programs thinking, oh, it's nice, I can only do 45 minutes. And before you know it, you'll get hooked and you're going to want to do more and more. And because of the way the programs are made, it's very easy to scale them up. So you're going to continue training and you're going to do more and more. And then 3, are the programs actually good and are they worth the money? I personally think that all lifting knowledge should be free. All of my programs are available for free, but I'm also a weirdo and I don't make a living off of YouTube Fitness. I perfectly understand why Jeff made these programs so costly. I think they're $40. It's because it's worth the money. The guy put in the work. Each program PDF is something like 20 pages, I think. Let me check. Yes, it's 20 pages, and it's not 20 pages of fluff, okay? It's not 20 pages and there's 15 pictures of Nippard doing a double biceps. It's good information. It's actually more than that. I'm lying. It's 40 pages and it's good stuff. You know, I have a ton of people who ask me questions that I can answer because I know the answer, but it's things that are so obvious to me that I don't even think about making videos about, like how much time between sets. All of that is answered in this program. It really is more than a program. The program is a small portion of it. It's a ton of information. So if you're a complete noob and you want like a lifting Bible plus a program with it, you can absolutely go with Jeff's programs. You cannot go wrong. Again, some of his best programs to date. I am highly impressed, which means a lot because I think that Jeff Nippard, out of all of the programs I reviewed, makes the best programs, and this one is the best of the best. So, is it worth buying? I don't think you should buy a program, you should make your own, but if you are dead set on buying a program, yes, buy this. And even if you're not a noob, these programs can be scaled up. You can just disregard the minimalism and do 3 sets, 4 sets. These are programs I could have written. Like I'm looking at the 4 times a week here, yeah, that's great shit. Do 3 or 4 sets instead. He even includes evolving rep ranges. I mean, of course, I was going to love that stuff. So this is it for today. This is my review. I actually think that you should actually invest the money in it because it's worth it. You will keep these PDFs and these programs for years and years and years, and you will be able to progress greatly on it. So, to finish up with a final word on minimalism, again, realize and remember that a minimalist is someone who refuses to do more even though he knows it would be beneficial. A maximalist refuses to do less even though he knows it would be beneficial. Be in the middle. Be the guys that does what works the best. Don't label yourself. Don't follow the church of HIT. Don't follow the church of 15 sets. Do what works and what is the most convenient for you. Keep in mind that training 45 minutes as a novice is not called being a minimalist, it is called being smart. But at some point, you will have to evolve as adding sets is an important part of volume and intensity manipulation, as long as intensity is maintained, of course. And it would be stupid to deprive yourself of an important tool for ideological brownie points. So this is that for this video. Jeff's programs are a good starting point. They will give you the hard sets that are necessary to start getting into training, which at some point you will be able to multiply to keep growing again, and again. And whether Jeff realized it or not, these are valuables that are already implanted in his program because these are not minimalist programs, these are actually efficient programs. Thank you for watching. Have a good night.